Okay.
Hello, I'm Marilyn Saarni, a UC Master Gardener volunteer from Contra Costa County, and I'm certified by Rescape in Sustainable Firescaping. Today, we're going to do a brief overview of firescaping, and this talk is sponsored by Oakland Fire Safe Council and Oakland Community Preparedness and Response. Oh, sorry. So let's talk about risk. 45 million homes now are in the wildland-urban interface, WUI. WUI describes those areas where homes and communities are encroaching on wild landscape. And California landscapes are all prone to periodic wildfires, just like clockwork. The highest wildfire risk in these landscapes are older existing homes. So the East Bay Hills are in the WUI. The red and pink on this map are very high risk, and orange and light orange are high risk. The reason they're two different colors is that these maps are always produced as local responsibility areas, which are cities and county, versus CAL FIRE responsibility areas. Excuse me, CAL FIRE responsibility areas, the SRA, and those are the state responsibility areas. Up to 90% of homes in the wildland fire are damaged or destroyed by flying embers. And so your first move on all the preparations you want to make to help your structures and gardens survive is to think how to mitigate the risk for embers. The most recent fire safety standard work with zones, and the newest zone is zone 0. That's 0 to 5 feet, the ember resistant zone around structures. And zone 1 is 5 to 30 feet, lean, clean, and green. And zone 2 is 30 to 100 feet, which is the reduced fuel zone. Latest standards call for constant maintenance of defensible space, as well as hardening your home to keep those embers from entering through vents and cracks and underdoors. And I have to say, we're talking about firescapes today, but really starting at your house is the most important thing. Embers can fly well ahead of a wildfire front, at least a mile or more. And when I say embers, please keep in mind also firebrands, pine cones on fire, palm tree fronds, all kinds of things come into that category. So you want to protect your home and loved ones. And your primary goals have to be time to escape and giving first responders a fighting chance to protect your home. It's not necessarily to save your home. The severity of the fire and conditions you can't control mean that you can't be sure what the results are, but the priority is always you to be safe and first responders to be safe. Two key factors in creating a fire smart landscape: you have to plan and implement. This means a lot of thinking and walking around your house and keeping distances between your home and other structures and combustible items and materials like high flammability plants, wooden decks, wood fences, and I want to talk later about wood fences a bit, trash bins, wood piles, compost bins. During the fire season, you're better off putting all of your green debris into the green waste cans than keeping a compost pile that's flammable, especially anywhere within 30 feet of any structure. And maintaining is going to be the biggest job once you get your garden basically planned. You have to keep your landscape groomed, hydrated, trimmed, and correctly mulch. And mulches that are safe are actually limited. You can use hard mulches like gravel and beautiful rock, I'm a geologist in training, so beautiful rock is a favorite of mine. Or compost. Outside the 30-foot zone, you can use wood chip, especially large particles, large pieces. These will be less likely to catch fire, but you don't want anything but non-combustible mulches in the first 30 feet. And I just want to say you can have an earth-friendly garden, but you want to increase the odds your garden and your house will survive a wildfire. And it can be water-wise too. So it's choose the right plant for the right spot. And I'm not going to read these or go through these, but I just want to say there are exceptions for every rule. There are several lists to check on fire resilience, fire resistance. We'll talk more about that. But what you really want to do is look at a plant and keep these characteristics in mind and look at those lists, and your plant may not be on the list, and consider whether the plant you're thinking of putting in your garden is likely to be flammable. All conifers are high-risk choices due to the heavy litter and the volatile oils. And it's really hard to live with that because we have so many conifers in our landscapes. Basically, there should be no conifers within 30 feet of your house, and better not within 100. So fire retardant and fire resistant. So you can have fire retardant plants in that 5 to 30 feet zone. And you should have basically plants that can't even catch fire or will just turn into ash in the 0 to 30 feet zone. So they will sizzle and wilt when they're exposed to flames and heat, but they don't create a big flame. They don't spit out embers. If they're properly maintained, can they catch and extinguish embers? And the trade-off on this production is irrigation, with the exception of succulents. And this is a drought year. I have a 35-foot succulent bed. It's requiring water. The water table has dropped so low, and the plants and the soil are so dehydrated. This year, you probably need to water your succulents to keep them fire retardant. Versus fire resistant. And I think everything should be fire resistant at minimum in your landscape. I'm not going to go through all of these, but I wanted to say there is a big difference between fire resistant and fire resilient. You can see one on that bullet list is using plants that resist fire rapidly resprout, and that is regarding erosion after a fire. I would like to point out that a lot of the plants that do that actually spit and explode in a wildfire situation, and it is part of their evolutionary cycle. And there are many good reasons, I won't go into them, why they need this. It's actually, it reduces competition and allows for fresh growth and eliminates pests, blah, blah, blah. But those are fire resilient plants. And fire resilient does not mean it's going to be a safe plant in your landscape. So keep that in mind. So Firescaping Checklist. Please note that in this, there's several references to OCP&R, which is the Oakland Community Preparedness and Response organization. And I highly recommend you go to their site because they actually will give you a checklist. And I just want to say that while we're talking here about evacuation routes, you also need to prepare for yourself to get out with all the most important items and pets and children and so forth. So know your evacuation route. Keep it clear to vegetation. so firefighters can gain access and you can get out safely. And if you have a long driveway, you have many more things to think of. One is you should put out reflective stakes so your driveway is very easily seen in the dark. In these cases of wildfires, it could be nighttime, but the other situation that happens is if you have a lot of smoke and chaos and that it can actually be quite dark, and you need to help the firefighters be able to navigate. You want to clear on each side of your driveway, so they look at your driveway and know that it's going to be safe for them actually to carry up with the truck, drive up with the truck. And you have to provide a staging area and give them confidence that there's going to be a large enough area that they can turn their truck around and by the way, it doesn't all need to be paved, but it needs to be flat and navigable with a truck in an emergency. And there's more to it, but we're going to go on. Start at the house and work outwards. Learn how to harden your home. Mark your house entries clearly. I can't tell you how many times I've heard firefighters and fire chiefs say, we cannot see the addresses. We cannot tell how to get into the house or how the main entry, where the main entry is. This is something that, you know, those cute little paths that look like you're going to the witch's house in the forest isn't going to work here. You're going to have really wide, stable walkways, and they should be lit. And solar is great in this case because quite often power goes out. So the solar plant stakes work. And there are other ways of making clear, just having contrasting color and having it clear from where the fire truck comes up. Having it visible, by the way, from the street is even better. Evaluate the 5-foot perimeter surrounding your house. This is quite often, I think, the most painful part, because you go around your house, and we've had a tradition of foundation planting, and we have to depart from that. We can't use that aesthetic anymore. You need to convert to hard surfaces and gravel mulches, pavers, and so forth. And you want these to be really easy to keep debris free, because in wildfire season, you should be cleaning that area frequently, at least weekly. And if you have neighbors with pine trees, you may be having to do it daily. And this is where we can get into a whole discussion about blowers. I recommend electric blowers specifically. Some people actually have leaf vacuums. I want to say with the electric blowers, unlike the gas blowers, you don't need hearing protection. They can be variable and in speed, and they are very light. So I just want to put that into your minds as an option, a reasonable option. Plant sparsely with low-growing non-woody plants and keep them well hydrated. Another way to evaluate this area is think of a big firefighter with their giant jackets, a big backpack. They're carrying tools, big tools, and they want 5 feet for a reason. They don't want to have anything that's going to catch on them. They need to walk on the surfaces. They need to go all the way around your house to find embers that could be clustering up against your structure. So once you start thinking that way, you realize how important it is to not have the camellia hedge any longer, that being traditional in a lot of our older homes, or especially there should be nothing that's going to trip them. And you might think about this if you have a multi-level property, you might want to consider making sure that if there are steps involved, that they have high contrast, so it's clear in a dark situation. Develop a plan. Use those 3 zones of defensible plans. Space your plants apart. And keep in mind what maintenance you are actually capable of doing, or whether you can hire help to help you and to help with the maintenance. And start right now. We're in the middle of fire season already. It started officially May 3rd for both of our counties. And you need to remove all flammable debris within 30 feet. If you have weeds or grass anywhere in that 30-foot zone, make sure they're cut down to 3 inches or less. Just remove all the fire load. And I mentioned earlier, compost for the time being with the green waste pickup. So you're going to be monitored and maintaining all year round. And I want you to know you can take rainy days off. You sure can, unless you want to think about what plants are best to put in your landscape. But you can save yourself a lot of work in the winter with doing not only planting and everything, but getting all the mulching down so you don't have the weeds. Do sheet mulching. That's a great concept, but instead of doing bark, you'll need to do compost instead, because it's non-flammable. You want to limb up your trees. Winter is usually a good time for doing that. And as many of you have heard from other sources, I'm sure, you're going to want to limb up to 6 feet, but never ever remove more than 1/3 of a tree's canopy. A note on that: if you have a young tree, just leave it alone so that it can mature more before you do any of the limbing up. And choose a tree that isn't prone to be flammable in the first place. Remove all the fallen leaves and debris in that 30-foot zone. Actually, make it the 100-foot zone. I want you to pay special attention to wooden fences, the base of wooden fences. I've been watching training videos and evaluation, and one that was particularly horrific. The fire on the wooden fence happened over 100 feet away from the home, but it was at the bottom of a slope, and the fire got going at the bottom of the slope in the wooden fence where there was a pile of weeds on the outside of the fence. And once the fence got going, it just raced up the hill, and then the wooden fence attached to the house. Well, no wood fence should attach to the house. It should be only metal. And this is another hard one. You may have just built a beautiful new fence and have a wooden gate. You should remove that wooden gate and put in metal, because otherwise that fence will carry the fire to your house. It was just horrific to watch that particular progression. It was so fast. At any rate, non-flammable compost versus wood chip versus bark. Bark is the most dangerous kind of compost you can use. Gorilla hair is in particular a big negative. It's because it's not only a flammable material, but it allows for a lot of aerial pores inside of it. And so air being one of the elements that wildfire needs to get bigger and bigger. The barks have often oils. And the interior of a tree usually doesn't have that oil that makes embers explode out. It's going to be the bark. And so you want to use only compost or hard materials in that 30-foot zone. And outside of that, you can use wood chip. You want to keep up watering to support plant health. And in a drought year, what you need to do is particularly water your trees. Like I mentioned before, the soil is quite dehydrated. The water tables have dropped. And your trees, which you normally do not need to water in the summer, will require it this year. A deep soak is best. So if you have soaker hoses or even putting out cans filled with water that can slowly seep, Once every 2 to 3 weeks right now would be good, especially if you have a redwood. I see so many redwoods already beginning to get brown leaves. That's because they need water. So be sure to add it to their livelihood. And then work with your neighbors. Next door's home might be a death trap situation. If they need help and they'll accept it from you, by all means, go with that. And create a neighborhood organization where volunteers can go out and help. And at the moment, I want to say the best thing you could do right now is getting rid of all the juniper and thuja and arborvitae and all these popular plants of yesteryear in front of your houses, because firemen will pass those homes and they will catch fire, and that'll endanger your home no matter how much you do. So here are my resources. We'll provide those as a note in the comments after this recording, and check them out. Every single one of these is phenomenal. I want to encourage you in particular to buy Firescaping, Protecting Your Home with a Fire-Resistant Landscape, and get the hardback because you want to make written notes on it. It's really the best book out there, and it gives you so much information. And questions and answers. I see one question here that's about mulches. I just want to say, we've gone over the mulches. They're doing research. One thing I want to say is they're looking at mulches put out in November at the end of our wildfire season. And they're looking at barks and in this case, as well as wood chip, to see if it's safe by the next fire season. And another question I have here is on oak trees overhanging houses. Frankly, I wouldn't allow any tree to overhang my house because of the maintenance issue of the gutters, which we didn't talk about because that's more the home hardening side. But you're going to be doing so much maintenance already. I really want you to think whether that is wise. The rule is 10 feet of clearance above the house if you must have a bough over your house. To me, it's just like dropping embers on top of your house, and it just isn't wise. And you should have no trees canopy within 10 feet of your house all the way around. I think that's it.